Hey everybody, welcome to the webcast. We're here to talk about PowerShell Summit. We have a special guest, James Petty, who put it all together for us. Uh, so I guess we're just going to kind of go through, recap what was our favorite parts, and watch Kirk struggle with his hot sauce from the pre-show.
I'm good now.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm on the way back down. It was intense for me. That's the hottest thing I've ever had. It isn't for the meek, that's for sure.
No. And
So
I am
for those
weak.
for those just tuning in, Kirk, you just crushed some super spicy jerky after crushing season 17 lineup of the Hot Ones hot sauce.
That's
Second
what-
half of the.
Yeah, that's what JJ and I did. We started at the halfway point because the first row isn't hot enough to challenge. So. But it's my whole mouth is alive right now. Alive with pleasure, is that what they say?
My
Or
mouth
pain?
is alive with the sound of fire.
Right. So about a month ago, we did kind of lead up to the summit where James joined us for that one to talk about what was going to happen. But now that we've done it, did it go how you were hoping? We haven't done a live one in 3 years, I believe, because of issues.
Right. Yeah. 2019 was the last one that we did in person, and everything just happened like we didn't even miss a beat. It was phenomenal to be back together in Bellevue.
So 2018 was the only one I went live to, and this one, and I guess it felt different for me. In 2018, I just sat in the background and felt overwhelmed, and this time we have the podcast and we're doing the recap, so I had to really engage, and it was, I don't know, that is the most enjoyable conference I've been to.
Jordan, how would you compare day 1 to day 4 for you? You know how you said it's been a few years. Day 1, maybe you were nervous. How'd you feel kind of day 4?
So in day 4, we had the one event where they asked who has imposter syndrome, and I think everyone there feels inadequate to be there, which is kind of a weird state to be in. I don't know. I never felt up to the task, but I felt more comfortable talking to people instead of just fading in the background this time.
In fact, Jordan, we have a question I'll just throw up there right now. It says, Jordan, did you still feel like a noob at the conference?
Oftentimes, yes. Anytime Justin Grody, his talks, he's above my level. He'll make me feel that way. And there's a couple of them. I went to one about where they covered more C# for building your own text editor that went above my head. So
Adam Driscoll.
Yeah, Adam Driscoll. Yeah, so there were a couple that made me feel inadequate to be there, but overall, I could follow along and do a write up on each one. So I felt better this time. I guess I've improved in 4 years.
And I guess the benefit of going there is Justin Grody's there. You can just take his knowledge. You don't need to actually know it all. He has the PowerShell extensions for VS Code. I'd just borrow those. Nice little jumping off point.
Well, it was not only that, but you can just go and sit and have lunch with him.
Well, it took till late in day 3 for me to get the courage to talk to him. There were a couple people that I struggled to talk to. It was him and Jason Helmick, who is the nicest person ever. But something about it, I just was afraid to approach him. I didn't until Iron Scripter on day 4. I didn't talk to him. But overall, I don't know. I feel kind of bad. You put all that work into it, and then you just kind of have to sit in the background. You don't get to attend many of the sessions. But, well, I guess what's it like on your side? Because I was exhausted by the end of it. I can't imagine what you went through.
Oh, I was exhausted by the time Monday rolled around. So I rolled into Seattle on Thursday before to kind of do last-minute setups, last-minute walkthroughs. So by the time Monday rolls around, I was like, oh, everyone's here. You know, it's going to happen at that point because the train has left the station. There's no stopping it. But yet being able to attend the sessions, you know, I would try to attend a few 10 or 15 minutes, kind of catch the highlights. But the good news is they're all recorded, so I always get to go back and watch them later. Yeah, but it's definitely a different experience being on the organizing side.
Yeah, it was interesting. One nice thing about that is occasionally you catch in the hallway where we had one conversation. It was you and Mike Kanakos, and then Sydney Smith and Danny Martins from the PowerShell team swung by, and we just got to talk to people. That was just the conversations are amazing.
Right, and that's one of the things that can never be replicated in a virtual environment. We call it the hallway track. Is all those conversations that happen that are not in the sessions, they're not recorded. and they're all ad hoc. Like that was just I'd come out of the office, someone would come out of the bathroom, Sydney just came down the stairs, she just got in there, and then we all just started talking like for 30, 40 minutes. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I remember it was very insightful.
Well, first you attacked exchange, which felt personal. But then we talked about how we talked about how everything was open source, and that's a dialogue. One thing is interesting. Everyone that works within PowerShell wished more people opened issues, even if it was just to ask a question, just because the open source, they want the dialogue to happen and it improves with it. So they want more community outreach, even if it's just not contribute to add to something, but just to ask a question, something or a clarification point. They really appreciate that.
Yeah, the PMs on the PowerShell team reiterated to us that we would love it. We don't expect people to, whenever they open up an issue on any PowerShell related projects, to have the full answer. In fact, it's a lot more helpful if you start by asking a question, presenting your situation, and kind of starting a conversation and going from there. And hearing that was awesome, because I know in my head, I've always thought, I'm probably not going to file an issue because, people are going to read it. They know everything. And I probably am just overlooking something dumb. So let me just not file an issue. So hearing it from them was like, okay, I should probably open more issues and communicate more.
Yeah, we heard that exact line from both the PowerShell team and the PowerShell Docs team, which is Sean Wheeler, and the Azure side is Mike Robbins. Like they're all universal wish that more people would at least, even to ask a question, open up an issue so there's more of a dialogue happening. I guess before we're going to I want to go over some of the highlights, but Andrew gave his first talk at Summit.
I was just going to say, there's a question. Did you guys do any presentations at the PowerShell Global Summit?
Yes, I did. It was my first time doing a presentation there. It was quite fun. I talked about PowerShell and some stuff I've done with it, sharing it, getting other people to do it. The title talk was Many Hands Make Light Work, Empower Your Coworkers to Develop and Maintain PowerShell Projects. But honestly, it was more of a soft skills talk about how, communication and interacting with others was super important. But it was fun. I'm happy to get that first presentation kind of off the list and refine it and improve it for next time.
I think we can always send the recording over to Kelly and he can fix it for you.
Yeah, you can fix anything in post, right?
Sometimes.
That's the way it usually works for the podcast. I feel bad for the people that attend the recording session. They all leave like, well, this sucks. And then Kelly works his magic. It's like, this was awesome.
Actually, I think everyone I talked to who was on the podcast said they had a fantastic time.
Yeah, I just like to make the joke because when Mike wrote about his episode, one of his lines in there is, I thought it was an unremarkable conversation, which amused me. He said after he listened back to it, he was wrong and he enjoyed it. But just that one sentence is, I've been using that a lot.
Well, and that's true. You guys, if anyone in the audience isn't familiar with what you're talking about, you have a podcast as well. It's the PowerShell podcast, weekly episodes. You can follow them on Twitter as well. And it's really available anywhere you download podcasts. I mean, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Podbean, wherever. But it's good stuff. And it focuses primarily on, what do you say, the community? Because the PowerShell community is amazing. And after hearing your stories of the PowerShell conference up in Bellevue, it's like, yeah, you guys, it's a tight-knit group, and it's so welcoming and supportive. Really impressive stuff.
Yeah, putting the podcast out there, we've felt the warm welcome. I think most recently this week we had someone from the PowerShell Docs team, Sean Wheeler, on the podcast, just giving us his time, sharing his perspective on things. And then the week before that, we had another Microsoft employee talk about security. So it's been really awesome to have people receive it well. And also we've been able to have some really great conversations and learn a lot ourselves. So.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like I'm glad we're not showing anything because I can talk about the things I understand and then just nod along or pretend once we go out of my depth. It makes me feel like I belong.
Nobody knows everything, right?
Nope. One of the first things they showed this at the very first event, just the state of the show. They're talking about something called Crescendo, which is a PowerShell module where if you have a.
Do you want me to share your screen, Jordan?
I can't show this one just because it's just one to talk about and read about. But it's if you have a command line tool like a dxdiag or any sort of tool that like open up a firewall rule. I forget what is the command line of that is, but you can use Crescendo and it will wrap around and it will build an entire module based on that, where you can use PowerShell command lines to do that. So in the case of dxdiag, where I had to put regex in to pull the data I want, that still has to be in there, but then you'll just have a PowerShell module that you can run against dxdiag constantly. It just makes it easier to run.
It's a pretty cool new project to create tooling around command line tools, I guess, or to create PowerShell modules around them. So you only have to worry about like how you translate the parameters from the command line tool into PowerShell module stuff. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And I think those modules spit out objects at the other end, which is obviously the beauty of PowerShell to begin with. It doesn't just puke text out to the screen.
Yeah, it turns it into an object, which is everything needs to be object oriented. Kirk with your Linux.
I love PowerShell. I remember when they first released it, how happy I was because it finally had a true Windows command line, Windows shell, and you can interface with it. It was a massive improvement, and they've made it better since day one.
In fact, we have a question that is kind of relevant right now. What would you recommend to PowerShell noobs? Where to start? And don't say read the documentation. Thanks, Marcel L.
Yeah, well, I think the best place to start, and I'm a little biased, but is the Learn PowerShell in a Month of Lunches. That is the best place to start. And I think anyone online in any of the forums or platforms or Slack or Discord will tell you that's the place to start. But obviously, the help documentation is also the second best place to start. That's one of the first things you learn in PowerShell in a Month of Lunches. Is the first chapter is how to use the help. It's how to read it, how it works, and how you can use it to your benefit.
Yeah, well, nice plug for your own book.
I didn't say I wrote it.
No, it's that is a fantastic book. That was one of the original PowerShell books, and it's just been improved and added to as PowerShell has improved as well. And then that one just recently came out, and it ties into PowerShell 7, and it has a lot of the cross-platform information.
Right. Yeah. The fourth edition is PowerShell 7, which you can run on the Windows or everything in the book, with the exception of 2 chapters, is cross-platform. We made sure that every example, every screenshot we did was cross-platform capable.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend that if you want to start too, check out the PowerShell podcast that Jordan and Andrew do. Not only start with the resources that James recommended, but the PowerShell podcast is going to tell you how to get into the community, where to go. They're going to cover topics like what do you do with crippling self-doubt, because everybody has it. It is a great resource if you're looking to get in. So I would start there too.
Yeah. And also, if you have a job and you have tasks, start taking the small steps to automate them. Find out what the PowerShell commands are that do what you're doing and save them into a script as you go through these other resources and gain more skills. It can be really nice to solidify what you learn by actually doing it and gaining the confidence as you go through and that kind of thing. And yeah, with our podcast, we do it weekly. So every single week there's a new episode. And kind of what we're thinking of with that is to be a voice to kind of be there for you along your journey, right? If you're the only one using PowerShell at your place of work, you may not have anyone to chat about or to point you to new things that are happening. So that's kind of the gap that we're trying to fill.
All right, we had a question in the chat about the podcast name. We've said it, but it's because it just sounds like the PowerShell podcast. Doesn't necessarily sound like it is the name of the podcast itself, but it's we took the name for SEO.
Yeah, it's easily searchable, the PowerShell podcast. You can find that really anywhere you can get podcasts right now.
It might even be the PowerShell podcast, not the.
There you go.
Yes.
There's a PowerShell news podcast that's been around for a while that does a pretty good job of keeping up to date with stuff as well. There's a couple of good ones that are worth tuning into. I prefer mine because I like me. I'm awesome.
Oh my gosh. Mark this down. I think this is the first time I've heard Jordan say that. So this PowerShell Summit was totally worth it just to hear that.
That's amazing. I'm used to Jordan just delivering crippling self-doubt. So to hear that you are confident in your show, I should probably listen to it.
Yeah.
I take that back. I did listen to the first episode. I should continue to listen to it.
Listen to the intros at the very least. So those things will hook you in real quick.
All right.
We have another question for you guys. Besides the Automation and DevOps Summit in Nashville in December, are you planning to attend any other conferences this year? Thanks, Josh H.
Well, I want to. I know there's a PowerShell Saturday, I believe, in Tennessee.
Yep, Chattanooga. That's I think Andrew said he's coming.
I
Yeah.
want to. Hey Kelly, can I go to?
We'll talk off air, Jordan. Okay.
So that's
that
August
kind of
12th through the 13th in Chattanooga.
Yeah, I hope to be there. I haven't actually asked anybody at work, but it'll be a good time.
Oops.
Sounds like there's going to be some emails today.
Yep.
So I would like to attend as many as possible, just because the live capture for the podcast, I enjoy doing that a lot. Doing it remote works, but we posted up just in a bar this weekend, and people would swing by, would talk PowerShell, and I like those conversations where there's no planning; they're just talking about what they're seeing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, circling back a little bit, that I really like about the summit is that it's all shop all day, and it's not like, oh, it's 4 o'clock, we can't talk about PowerShell anymore. It's like, no, we stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning talking PowerShell, and then we get up at 8 and do it again, and we repeat and repeat. And next thing you know, you're on the plane on the way home Friday, and your head is swimming.
It was a lot to dig in. One thing I didn't mention for Crescendo is you have to use PowerShell 7 to write that, but it is backwards compatible with for the modules it makes with PowerShell 5 or Windows PowerShell. All right, I do want to move on to some of the other highlights or the other questions.
Hang on. We've got. Let me do one more question here. It's actually a two-parter. What's the best and worst thing about PowerShell, in your opinion? And the follow-up to that is, how did Andrew get so smart and buff? So take whichever part of that question you prefer first.
Okay, I'll just take part two. Just magic is, I guess, being around Jordan. I don't know, something.
Buff by proxy?
Yeah, definitely buff. When people see me, they're like, "Wow, that is what buff is." Yep, that's me.
That was my first thought. Yeah.
But the best and worst thing about PowerShell, take it away.
I don't know if James wants to take this one or.
Yeah, I think for me, the best thing that I like about it is that, actually, it's probably the same thing. There are so many different ways to do a thing. So I think that's also the best and the worst. But just because I think one way is the best way to do it, Jordan may think that that's the absolute worst thing to do it, and we could have like a 20-minute argument about it. But at the end of the day, we're both right. And I think that for me, that's kind of the best and the worst.
That's when you just use measure command, and whichever one's faster, that's the right way.
One of my favorite tools in PowerShell is WhatIf.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And you'd be amazed how many people don't know about the WhatIf flag.
Yeah.
Or forget about it, Jordan.
One time. 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, one time, all those many times.
I actually was helping a friend with some automation in his office, and I put in WhatIf, and he didn't trust it, so he made me run it against non-critical machines to make sure it actually did WhatIf before he would let me.
So you had a target and a command WhatIf.
I love WhatIf.
Yeah.
It's so nice. If you're doing something that's actually touching something in production, I find it so useful to write your scripts or functions or whatever with WhatIf in mind, so that you can actually use the real code and just run it with WhatIf, and you can get an output of what would have happened.
Yeah.
So you can test things. And yeah, for me, just my space of mind, I need that. I need that safety.
All right.
Do you need me to share your screen, Jordan?
Yeah, let's share the screen. We'll talk about PSReadline. So this is one we covered in the podcast, but we found out from many MVPs we didn't do it justice. We loved it. That's why we talked about it as the second thing ever. But just PSReadline is the thing to help you keep your history and help you with your commands to run it. So if I just do git, by default it comes up git PSReadline option. It's the last one I ran, so it's helping me fill out the command automatically. And if you press F2, it'll come through and go through my history. And these are the commands that I've run. As you can see, I was messing with PS Word Cloud and not doing well with all of my git helps. So I didn't expect that to show up, but here we are. But the other valuable thing from that we ran into that one is I get my command properly finally. Apparently I can't get this. There we go. There's the help option. We talked about how you can use help to open up, but if you use just, like say if we do verbose, if you hit F1 at the end of the command, you can open up the help for that parameter, open it specifically to the parameter. You can read what you're looking for, and then when you hit Q, it's going to close it back out, and you don't have to leave your workspace. Which, if you're writing code, if you ever had to do that, that is never pleasant when you have to change that.
This is the PSReadline module. So if people don't have the latest version, they can get this by using install module PSReadline.
Yes, absolutely. So I'd probably just run in there if I did import, as recently did it. Look at that. We're back to PS Word Cloud and PSReadline.
There you go. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So that F2 tip, you can just be typing in a command and just kind of forget how it works exactly, or maybe want to see some example. You just press F2 and it pops up the whole help, and then you just press Q to leave it again. You don't have to open up new windows. You just stay all in the, yeah.
So yeah, just this, get the command, hit F1. If you're not sure what global does, it'll open up right to that specific part. Q. You never have to leave your workspace. You don't have to start commands over. It is no more two PowerShell sessions open. It's a huge help if you're going to be diving in to do a lot of reading.
Yeah, that's one thing I took away from the summit, was that there's a lot of usability things being added to PowerShell, I guess, ways to make it better and more user-friendly. Like as your default terminal with modules like PSReadline, like how can they make it more usable? How can they improve that workflow?
Absolutely. I guess the other thing, while we're in VS Code, that's one of the talks I went to. We mentioned Justin Grody earlier, and he did an entire talk just about how did he make his VS Code work for him in PowerShell. And that guy is crazy smart. So he has an extension in there called PowerShell Extension Pack. You hear my typing? This right here, it's just a pre-built of the 29 modules that he uses. I was skeptical to use this, or 28. I was skeptical to use this one at first because 28 sounds like a lot. And actually, after I was talking to him about it, and he pointed out that VS Code doesn't load in any of the modules until it's being used. So having them doesn't mean it's using up resources. It's only when you use it that it goes live. And just some of the things you have in there, like he's got Git Lens, which helps, I believe, view where you are with your pull request. He's got a thing that puts the error up in the top window that helps out. It's just a lot of different things where if you're writing, it will help you track it down and get it fixed. You got a to-do list in there. So if you don't want to do all 28, you can just come to the module itself and scroll down and choose the ones you want. But it's just for these, I've been diving into this since I've got back, and there's a lot of things that can help, I guess, make this experience a bit smoother for you.
Yeah, I think encouraging people to use VS Code is a good thing. And to discover all these extensions and plugins and ways to like expand the capability of VS Code would take quite a while. And Justin has been kind enough to spend a ton of time in VS Code and find out a bunch of really good tools that help with common tasks that you might find if you're using PowerShell.
Well, I mean, it's worth noting, VS Code is there's others, but if you're using ISE, that's considered dead. And unless there's a security patch, it's not going to be updated anymore because that's for Windows PowerShell.
Yes, and you can't run PowerShell 7 in it.
And you can't, yeah. So if you're looking to use the latest PowerShell and have everything up to date, VS Code is highly recommended. If you can use others if you want, but it's time to start moving over. I was a slow adopter to it just because I fear change.
Same.
Yeah.
Take ISE out of my cold dead hands.
The CEO of PowerShell.org also struggled, so you're not alone.
Got a question for you guys. How do you make sure your scripts work across different PowerShell versions? Marcel L.
I usually run mine in against like GitHub Actions, so you can run your pester test through GitHub Actions. And I just make one of those options are what operating system do you want it to run on, and I just tell it to run on Ubuntu latest, in Windows latest, and Mac OS X latest. That'll run against all three.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where you're executing your script. If you're executing it on a bunch of Windows endpoints that don't have Windows 7, then you wouldn't necessarily need to make it work with just exclusively PowerShell 7 stuff. But, like you're saying, James, if you're doing some stuff in the cloud, you can just specify PowerShell 7.
Yeah, and that's for the PowerShell versions. If it's one where it's relying on a specific module, like if you're doing something with Active Directory, that's just one where you're going to have to do some finagling for that one. But as far as version, you also can, if you want to force people to use a certain PowerShell version, call that up when you're calling the script. You can say, I think, call the PowerShell version it should use. So if there's an older version that someone for some reason is way back on 3, you can still force them to run it on, or if it needs to be on that one, you can force them to run it on a specific version. All right.
James, I've got a question for you. Being so involved in the conference itself and somewhat behind the scenes, what was the biggest takeaway for you from this event?
I think for me, it's just realizing that the community is still there. You know, a lot of people were kind of thinking, oh, well, the community's dead. The community's not doing anything. You know, all the user groups kind of died. I think there was only 1 or 2 left. People who were writing blogs kind of stopped. No one was live coding anymore. It's just like 2 years of being hunkered down in our basements, in our home offices, took a real toll on people. So getting to see people be re-energized was definitely, I think, one of the best parts for me.
Awesome.
At least a dozen people come up and say, I've been re-energized, back in the community. I'm going to start doing, whatever I was doing 2 years ago.
Nice. Another question from Russell K. What is the best resource for sample PowerShell scripts?
So there's a couple sources, but one that comes to mind would be the PowerShell gallery. So there's a command called find script that you can use to find scripts. And if you want to look at them, you can use the command, I believe, called save script. Maybe I made both of those up, but I'm pretty sure those are commands you can run. And there's also GitHub, which has a lot of great stuff, but those would be 2 that I'd suggest. There are others, so.
Yeah, I also typed in the chat, the forums, .powershell.org is a great place to look for questions and people. Here's my code. What's wrong with it? Or here's the code that I have. And of course, there's also Slack and Discord as well.
So I'm in the Discord and the Slack, and it's very active. If you have a question, you put it in there. You're going to get a good answer. It might not be a code example, but they'll definitely get you started where you can find it.
Yeah, and I think it kind of depends on what you mean by sample scripts. If you're kind of looking at like examples of PowerShell code before like how it would be used, I think that there might be some good stuff. If you go through a resource like Learn PowerShell in a Month of Lunches, as you go through it, you'll be exposed to some code that will kind of help show you what a script would look like and give you some examples in that regard.
Got another question here for you. Did they talk about desired state configuration this year? That's from S.
So I didn't attend that session, but I believe DSC is now open source and there's a more official module around it. They cleaned up a lot of issues with it.
Yeah, I think that was officially announced yesterday at the DSC community call, which can be found online. I'll have to find a link and send it to Kelly. But we did have 2 talks about DSC. One from Jason Helmick, so he owns DSC as a program manager, and then Raymond, who's a Microsoft employee, who's also part of the big, the DSC community. I think Gail also may have done a talk as well.
Yeah, so it's pretty active. And I talked to some of the people that came out of that session, and they were excited. A lot of the work that's been done on its way to open source has made it a lot more accessible if you're interested in using PowerShell for DSC.
Got one other question here. Was there a situation where you had to resort to a different solution to solve a problem than PowerShell? That's from Marcel L.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I don't try and force PowerShell on people or on myself. Like a lot of times you can, like if there's a tool that you already have in your environment, you can use that tool and call it from PowerShell. But sometimes there are things that just work, just utilities and tools that get the job done. PowerShell is really great for bringing things together and adding additional functionality. But quite frequently I see things that are just easier to handle a different way. And now it's fun to do it in PowerShell, but
yeah, my default is PowerShell, but even it's just a couple weeks ago when we did the printer episode, the first command that I ran was actually a different utility. I just called it from PowerShell, but that was for installing the drivers into the machine. So, I mean, there's several times where I have to use something else, but my default is to try PowerShell because, I don't know, I love it.
Yep. That's pretty much my approach as well. But yeah, just because I like PowerShell, I don't try and force it on everyone for every situation.
Oh, hang on. There you go.
I have a little bit. For me, it comes down to use case. I started scripting in PowerShell. When I moved to a mixed environment, it didn't make sense because there's multiple OSs, so I've written a lot of stuff in Python. However, use case is important. If you're in Active Directory in O365, there is so many pre-built tools now that I would highly recommend that as your tool. It does make sense to look at it, I think, especially if you're primarily Windows, is can PowerShell solve this? And if not, where do you go second?
Yeah. One example that comes to mind is 365. I mean, I haven't done this in a while, but managing spam, I think stuff like that. There's a portal for 365 that's way better than trying to do it with PowerShell commands or whatever. I don't remember how I was doing it back in the day.
But I guess one of the things I like PowerShell is if PowerShell's not currently the best, it's only a matter of time until there's something there. I think Crescendo came about initially because winget was a command line tool, and they wanted to build a PowerShell module around winget, and then it just expanded from there.
There's also one thing to call it. The admin panel is very good, but there are some features that are only command line supported for O365 still. So I'm of the opinion that PowerShell is an invaluable tool, especially if you're in O365.
Oh yeah, a whole bunch of Microsoft runs on PowerShell, so it's definitely a good tool to know.
Ready for another question?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. WPF for WinForms or PS GUI? Mike P.
So I would say WinForms just because that is what I have always used. I don't know if WPF is a better option, but due to my familiarity, WinForms.
Well, yeah, I guess it depends on your use case, but I guess I'll go the other end of the spectrum and I'll choose. Honestly, I want to say universal dashboard. Like, let's go.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Like, let's just, check out universal dashboard if you want to do some really fun, GUI, interactive dashboard type stuff.
I'm a big fan of XAML, so I'll yield toward WPF, but it may not work as well in PowerShell as it does in something like native C#. I mean, I know it does work, but it may not be as intuitive in that build process.
Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts, gentlemen?
Yeah, if you want to share my desktop again, this is the most critical
Love
thing I learned from PowerShell. This right here,
Oh, buddy.
this is VS Code pets. I have a clip art and a cat that are playing on my screen. So while I'm typing, they're here to help me.
What hat is Clippy wearing? I need to know
It's
this.
just a backwards green hat. Do we want to have a different hat for Clippy? Let's go. We'll give him a yellow hat. Sometimes he's on a skateboard.
For some reason, I thought it was like a Robin Hood, like that green with like the yellow feather coming out.
Yeah, and as these two Clippy meets, they actually become close friends. Look at that.
Oh, that's Carl Clammer.
Yeah. So if ever you ever feel like you need a cat climbing the side of your console while you're trying to work out some code, VS Code pets, that is the solution.
If you ever wonder what PowerShell was ultimately built for, pet
Well,
panel.
this is VS Code specific. This is
Is it? Oh, it's VS Code. Okay.
That's why they're getting rid of the ISE. It didn't support pets.
It did. Or Clippy.
There's the skateboards.
All right. So I will say I think attendance, probably just because things was a bit down this year for Summit. So whether it's a PowerShell Summit or Saturday's coming up or next year's, if you're any interest in PowerShell, if you're just getting started, there's OnRamp that will get you a crash course in getting up on your DevOps skills. Or if you're looking to learn more and you've been using it for a while, it's worth attending. It is an amazing event.
It's a career-changing and life-changing event, no doubt. So thanks for putting it on, James. I mean, an absolute blast. You've seen the impact that it's had on us and so many others. So
Let's see what else we got. We're going to go with the dog now.
Okay.
who showed you this? Was this Justin Grody?
Yeah, this is the end of maximizing the value of your VS Code.
Oh. Put on the crab.
We need a crab.
I need a crab. In my
All right.
life here.
We probably need one of everything.
Oh, yeah. Just throw them all in.
I believe there's a rock that doesn't move. Yeah, Rocky.
Rocky.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw a snake. Let's get a snake in there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I told you this is the most important thing that I learned. Oh, the snake's got a book and some glasses. Who doesn't like learning?
Educate me. What's a Totoro?
Well, let's find out.
I'm thinking we sent Jordan to this conference for this.
This is what he came
Money
back
well
with.
spent.
It was
Money
worth
well
it.
spent. No, this is what we call icing on the cake. If it keeps Jordan happy, it's all
The
good.
snakes at a golf cart. Now I've achieved.
I've seen everything.
Yeah, it's my new favorite, golf cart snake.
I'm going back to Florida with this.
All right. And on that note, let's wrap this up, guys.
Yeah. No, I would say any interest in PowerShell. I know of a couple. There's the Research Triangle PowerShell user group that's worth seeing. I would start with user groups. Find one. Most of them are going remote now, so you don't have to be local. And when you get really into it, I recommend the Summit. It will change your view on PowerShell. If you don't love it more than just about everything, go to Summit. You'll change your mind.
Yeah, PowerShell.org has a calendar that has some events on it. Is that correct, James?
Yeah, well, it's kind of broken at the moment because Meetup decided to change their API and not tell anyone. But we're manually adding things as they as we find them. I know New York has a very active remote user group, and then I run a user group here in Chattanooga, but we opted not to go remote just because no one wants yet another Zoom meeting. But like I know Stevie did a Crescendo talk last night for the Research Triangle. That was really good.
Yeah. So if you're looking for just a user group, which is a free thing that's remote, that will also be up on the PowerShell Summit, where you can find a calendar of those where you can just hop in and learn specific things. It's I think right now there's only 2 active ones outside of RTP-Seg. I just can't remember the other one. I think it's based out of New York.
Yeah, New York. I know SoCal stopped meeting here recently. Yeah, so I think it's just the 3 of us now.
No pressure for Andrew, but he was talking about getting Florida back up.
Hey, we'll have a launch party at some point. So
I might head that way if you're if you start something.
Yeah.
It's like a few hour drive.
let's do it.
All right, thanks for everyone tuning in. I couldn't cover everything that I learned in that one. We did a recap of all 4 days if you want to go read those. And it's just, I don't know, it's an amazing event. I hope to see a lot more people there in future years.
And we did have one final question. I won't post it, but they're curious to how your throat is, Kirk, after eating the hot stuff.
They don't care
in the
about me.
pre-show.
That's
Yeah,
all.
I think
Just
for me, I'm fine right now. There was a moment where it was quite intense, and I was worried if this goes up anymore, I'm gonna have to step out. But it didn't. It didn't go past that point. It was survivable. So.
Yeah,
All right. Well, there we go. All right, Jordan, Andrew, James, thank you all very much. I can't wait to revisit this next year at the next conference. You guys, it's been awesome.
It's been a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a
everybody.
pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Don't forget to subscribe to the
PowerShell
podcast.
All right. Thank you for being a part of our webcast today. If you had questions that we were not able to get to today, feel free to reach out to our support forums. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.